me ask you, David, can the cameras see
I
that?
gather,
Yes, from that one.
This one over here on the wall by the clock.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
No, I haven't heard from them
But you have
since,
to switch it on.
I told you that I couldn't find anything that says stormwater kicks in on that. Didn't I, or did I? Did I just imagine it? But I can't see any reason why there's a stormwater requirement there.
yeah, okay, yeah, I don't either. We are on air.
Outside the usual.
Okay.
We don't need the permit.
We're on air.
Okay, I'd like to call the April 2nd meeting of the Planning Board of the Town of Newbury to order. It's 7:02. And as is our custom now, for the television audience, introduce ourselves. My name is John Weiss. I'm the chair of the board.
Kathleen Pearson, Vice Chair.
John O'Connell?
Martha Taylor, Town Planner.
George Morse, Associate Member.
David Powell.
Okay, so our first order of business is looking at the minutes from last meeting. And does anyone have any comments on these minutes at all?
I believe David and John do.
Yeah, well, I think we've resolved it. And I'm not sure how, was that something that, I didn't track back your comment to Martha today.
Was it on the, what?
It's on the-
Which was it, site plan review of
The subdivision rules and regs.
I thought
Right.
that's
Yeah,
what it would be,
Yeah,
Yeah,
I didn't,
right.
because I had the same, or maybe not the same, but I,
It says everywhere that it should say. My memo, my email to you was wrong. I found it elsewhere.
okay.
So, we can say it someplace else if we want to, but I think we've said it enough.
so,
Well, the agreement is, I think, that I withdrew my concern and essentially agreed with John that the stormwater regs which are cited in the subdivision rules are sufficiently demanding and specifically mention permeable pavement, so I don't think we have to put it into that particular section about paths, etc.
okay.
Just to be clear, David,
Yeah.
it's infiltration requirements in general it talks about, of which permeable pavement is one option.
Right. Yeah.
But we are mandated to re-infiltrate as much as was happening before.
Yeah.
Now, I don't believe for a moment that those numbers are correct, but they are the official numbers.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
is that issue okay then? All right?
And then,
done with that,
So,
yeah.
so
right, and
I,
then there was also a typo which
there's a
David
typo
picked up.
on building commissioner?
Yes.
Yes, right.
And then I just had a question just on two of these things because I wasn't sure what would, in the discussion of the TW excavating, it indicated that John would follow up with the conservation agent to whether or not an RDA would be required.
Well, I just read the regulate, I did follow up with Doug.
You did.
And he didn't seem to have any objections.
Okay.
He understood. And in fact, I was a little surprised that he didn't want to, because that's usually his position.
Okay. And then the other one is some revisions need to be made in connection with this transfer of the stormwater permit, and since it's not on the
It
agenda.
is not
for tonight-
required. Does not kick in, near as I can tell.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's okay as it is.
Okay. All right. So with that, do I have a motion on the minutes?
Yes, I move that we accept the minutes of whatever it was, March 19th.
And seconded by John. All
Second,
those
yeah.
in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that's as amended, correct?
Yes, amended.
Yeah.
Right. ANRSs and appearances, none. Old business, proposed zoning amendments for the spring ATM, preparation for public hearing for 3 items: medical marijuana bylaw, site plan review bylaw revisions, flood hazard overlay district bylaw revisions. So I think we should start with the medical marijuana. Maybe I'll just give a quick intro, and then George and Martha, who really have spent most of the time on this, but one of our charges after the last meeting was to sit down with Ginny, our town council, and review issues such as operating procedures and the like. We did have that meeting and concluded that that it was probably the best thing to do is keep anything to do with operating out of our proposed ordinance, and that would be something that would be dealt with at a later time. We then met again this morning to ensure that we were on the same page and came to the conclusion that we would not bring something forward for this town meeting because it hasn't had time to percolate, and we don't know who would be responsible for it, but if such a question was asked, we would say that the operating procedures that might come into play have apparently not been adopted by any other community at this point in time. And the state regulations that require a RMD are very strict in their operating procedures. So I think that at this time, we're very happy just to move forward with the bylaw as it is. Now, would you?
I think I need clarification.
Yes.
Yes.
So this is in regards to whether the responsibility was going to be going to someone like the Board of Selectmen versus the Planning Board, that part of the bylaw?
No.
No?
No, we are still, the bylaw is with the planning board, and there is nothing going to the Board of Selectmen. However, there was language in the last portion of the bylaw that addresses things that are most properly addressed by the Board of Selectmen.
And
So-
that's what I was
Yeah.
referring to.
So there are
that's right.
6 or 7 items at the end that simply say, if this happens, you will report to the Board of Selectmen. If this happens, bring it to the Board of Selectmen. If this happens, bring it to the police chief, other than us.
And we're going to leave it as is?
And we'll leave that as
Okay.
is.
Okay.
I'm
that
happy
sounds
with,
good.
I'm happy with that,
Okay?
yes.
Martha?
I don't think I have anything to add. What I did want to pass out is the draft that I put together for, that's now available for the public hearing. And I think it incorporates the changes that we talked about last time. And so I'm just going to pass that out. So if you can bring it with you to the public hearing in 2 weeks, because this will be the basis of what we're discussing.
Well, I think I should maybe just step back a bit. So the items that are on this old business, the medical marijuana, the site plan review, and the flood hazard, will be the subject of our public hearing, which will be 2 weeks from tonight.
And you're encouraging people to come.
And we are encouraging people to come, and it's scheduled for 7:15?
7:15.
7:15. All right, site plan review bylaw, I'm not sure if there's anything new we need to add to this at this point in time. It's, I think, been put to bed.
I think it has pretty much been put to bed. So I have also a draft to hand out with the latest changes, and this is what's available for people to review for the public hearing.
Okay, let's take a look at that. And then finally, the flood hazard overlay, and again, we have this obligation to have this ready by the town meeting, but that these new maps will go into effect on July 6th of 2014.
16th,
July
16th.
16th, apologize, of 2014, and it is, at this point in time, pretty pro forma, I think. I know in our discussion with the Board of Selectmen and the Conservation Commission, they all believe that the new maps are correct. Just in looking at all these three, for the public hearing, we'll have a presentation, a boiled-down version of what we did for the workshop on medical marijuana. I think we had maybe 15 or 16 slides for that. I think we want to compress that down to a more manageable number, and then maybe 1 or 2 slides on site plan, and then 1 or 2 on the flood hazard overlay, and whether those can carry forward for town meeting if required, we would do that. Any comments on that in terms of how we would want to move forward?
Martha, you haven't had any inquiries from the public in regards to any of these documents, have you?
No, I haven't. It appeared in the Daily News today, was posted at Town Hall. I posted it on the website, and so far, nobody's contacted me.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, we can move on. Is that all right with all? Anybody else want to bring anything else up on old
Sounds
business?
good to me.
Okay, on new business, the master plan review. Let me give you a summary of this.
Could I, before we go to that, bring up at least one thing, which is old business, which is not on here, which is as a result of me driving here today. since you don't drive that way. 101 Turnpike.
Oh,
We-
where were we going to handle that? Yes, because we have some photos of
Yeah,
that.
and actually, I forgot my tablet at home. I have some photos that George took. But to give an update, unless, did you have a specific question, or shall I?
Well, my specific question is that I drove past it on the way to the meeting, and if you had been wishing to go down Sled Road, forget it.
That's been an issue all along.
Yeah, and there is more equipment on the site than there has ever been in terms of my counting just quickly, you know, traveling past at 40, 50 miles an hour. They're obviously doing some site work.
Yes, they are.
But at the same time, I just think that if you were, you know, there's no sort of sign of there being any sort of public way there at all. And I think that that is an issue which is not a conservation issue, it's an issue that we have to, I think, stress.
We, quickly, as we were
Yeah.
meeting this morning on the medical marijuana, we talked about that and whether or not it was time to ask Angelo to come back in, because that was brought up as an issue. The fact that we weren't sure if he might be planning on deviating from his plans that he presented to us. So it's a series of questions, and so maybe we ought to just ask him to come back in and sign exactly where he is.
This question is regarding he's using the public road as his driveway, as his parking lot. That was addressed and stating, I believe, when we had this original discussion, that was
Yes.
not going to be allowed.
Right.
So-
If I can just
Yeah.
fill you guys in on the conversation. Doug and I went out there yesterday, and he actually came in to see Doug on Monday.
Oh, yeah.
He is in the process of breaking up the ledge, getting prepared to pour the foundation, which he says is going to go in next week. The reason he said the vehicles are parked along Sled Road is because the vibrations broke windows in one of the vehicles. So he was parking them there during the day, was supposed to put them back on the site at night. Obviously, that hasn't happened. So I think that needs to be readdressed with him. The question regarding deviation from the plans is they staked out the road, and these are the photographs that I took yesterday, and I apologize, I left them at home. But I think he was surprised when the road was actually staked out to see how much of the right-of-way it actually takes up. In the let me pull this out. So, here's the right-of-way, and it actually does go out to a stone wall, which is kind
Yeah.
of buried in the woods
Right.
right now. And Sled Road, there's a piece of ledge right in here, so, clearly, over time, people just kind of drove over on this side to avoid that
Right.
piece of ledge, plus the bit of wetlands that's in there. And,
But you see, he removed this section of the wall.
Right, right.
And so now it looks as though the whole site sort of fades into and across somewhere over here, anyway.
right, no, absolutely. And that's been, as Kathleen said, that's been brought up with him before. One of the concerns I had was when he staked it out, the middle is kind of coming, well, it's down here, and this was coming beyond where the roadway is currently and getting into wetlands and that kind of thing, and I was wondering whether it was possible to pull it farther north. But
Would it still be in the right-of-way or be on
it
his
wouldn't be.
property?
It can't, I came back and looked at the plans, and I think it's pulled as far north as it can be. It is going to involve widening the entry off of Route 1. There's some guardrails coming in here, and it wasn't called out on the plans that I can tell that those need to be relocated. And he's got to work with Mass DOT on all of that. Because right now, the entrance, as you can see, is right here. So I was originally concerned that it might be appropriate to have him revisit this to see if it could be pulled closer to a site, but I think it is pretty much
You
what
think
it is.
not, huh?
Yeah, I think not. And Doug looked at it, and he also thinks not, because they're maintaining 24 feet here, which they're going to need for two cars to pass, and there apparently is interest in purchasing this lot over here.
Yeah, I was
These
gonna
lots.
say, that lot is currently under some discussion.
Right, right.
Martha, where is that ledge again? Is that the jut that comes
That
out?
ledge is right, it's.
I thought it
it's
was
kind
here,
of
no?
right in- No, it's right in about here.
Mhm.
And they've got, if you go out to the site, they've got some green stakes there which indicate the edge of the roadway as designed, this portion of it. They are gonna run into some issues because this is 16.5 at this point, and the grade over here is 12 point something, so they're gonna have to, they're gonna have to expand their work to get back down to grade. The other thing that was a little bit disturbing going out there, they had a stake which was probably 2 feet above what's now the current grade, and Angelo said finished grade is gonna be about 2 feet above that. So they're pulling a lot of stuff out, they're gonna have to bring a lot of stuff back in.
So that's worth a that alone, I think, is worth a discussion.
Yeah, so I think it would be, and he offered, I think it's
Yeah,
appropriate
so
to
have
have
him-
him come in and.
Not on the,
not
on the 16th,
Right,
the first meeting in May.
right. So by then the foundation should be in, but, I am a little bit concerned at this point about how much the grades are being manipulated.
But that's gonna need to be addressed with even stormwater, because if he's gonna be
Well,
changing
yeah,
the grades.
I'm not sure.
He's not changing the grade, I think it's more a question of, whether it needed to be that extreme in the original design, but, right now this is the approved plan, and it's what he's going with.
Oh, so it's not.
So he
altering it.
hasn't,
Oh,
he's
okay.
not changing
No, he's
the
not.
design, he's changing the grade because the plans tell him to. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to be unclear.
Has anybody done well, it's pretty difficult to do at this point, but one of the things that occurs to me is that we have almost more vehicles on that site than we have parking spaces, for heaven's sake.
Well, I don't know if those are meant to stay or not. That's a question we have to ask him.
Right,
Yes.
And all of this will lead to some other comment I have, but let's finish up on 101. So you
So
think that we should have a site visit?
But I,
Well, either a site visit or he comes in, and then that discussion, maybe we could.
Or a combination
I'm
of
curious
both.
on the time frame here. He has so much time to get back to Doug's response, and now he's starting his foundation. You said for his building, and his permit for this runs out when?
December, I think.
Okay, so he still
For
has sufficient
completion.
amount of time
Right.
left.
Oh, yeah,
Right.
he can get it done.
Okay.
And he has pulled a lot of stuff out of there. There's still some stored materials, and he said he's gonna get that cleaned up. The wrap is gonna come out.
Has he started removing the wrap that is functioning as pavement? Is ripping it or anything?
Towards the back of the site, around the cell tower, some of that has come out.
Okay.
The rest of it is still there and needs to be dealt with. He has addressed the silt fence except for a portion along Route 1, and Doug felt comfortable with what he saw.
So there's improvement overall.
So there is improvement.
Oh, yeah, no, there is.
And what's this about the windows on his equipment are gonna break due
No,
to?
the hoe ram, I guess, the vibration from the
Yeah.
hoe ram had broken
What, had
the
broken
window.
a window?
Yeah, so
And so that's why they're keeping it further away?
that's what he said.
That's
That's what he said
That's a
yesterday.
wonderful story.
It's a lot like the dog ate my homework.
It is.
I
I was
probably
going to say,
written by
thank
the
you,
same
John.
guy.
I was reminded of when I was a teacher and exactly, Granny said I couldn't do it. Right. Well, anyway, enough.
Well, that is still an ace in the hole, because I believe that he does not have the right to keep that equipment there because the approval by zoning is for a contractor's headquarters, not just the storage of equipment.
Right.
And he's not supposed to be blocking the access to the back property also because of any kind of fire.
Well, fire there, they'd never
Right.
get in if he.
Right.
Right, and it does also raise the connection between the granting of a occupancy permit for a building and the, what shall I say, the operational permit for a business. And we don't seem to have in our town kind of rules and regulations any kind of connection between those two. And I think this is a perfect example of where essentially we have somebody who is operating a business on a site which is in process.
But we learned from this experience.
Well, exactly, yeah.
Well, he's in contravention of zoning, so, I mean,
Right,
Sam
yeah.
could shut him down.
Yeah.
You know, I have not been pushing this because apparently there's no other place for him to put that equipment. But now I see stuff I've never seen there before, and I ask myself, where the hell has this been for the last 6 or 8 months?
Well,
So maybe
exactly.
there is another place.
So,
Yeah, you do get, yes, when all of a sudden, there's more trucks and equipment on the site than ever before.
Oh, yeah,
Your
something's
question is, well,
changed.
where was this?
Yeah. It may have been on another place from which he has been evicted.
Yeah, I don't know. So, the question is, do we want to do a site visit, or do we want to have him come in first and then do a site visit? What's the,
What will we accomplish? If we go out there, we already know that he hasn't completed any of the tasks, or not the majority of the tasks that we've already required. We know this.
mm-hmm.
So, I mean, going out there, I don't know,
Well, the only thing I thought, I didn't think that we as a whole group might make a site visit, but have you been going, John, on a regular
I
basis?
have not been recently for various reasons. I had been previously, but since the snow got off the ground, I haven't been
Sure,
out there.
I think
And I have
it
not
might-
seen this equipment.
I would suggest we delegate one of our members.
one of our members with the town planner to
Yeah,
make
to
a
go
site
look-
visit, to
make
report
a
back to us,
report,
and then
a
schedule a
first-hand
meeting with him
report.
coming in.
Martha obviously has been doing that, but I think it would be important that we have a member of the board do it.
I think before he comes in, it's
Yeah.
gonna be necessary
Yes.
for you to
Yes.
go out there and at
Yep.
least know
Yeah.
whether or
So-
not.
It
So-
wouldn't hurt for all of us to, any of us to just stop by. 'Cause,
Well, why
I
don't
mean,
you
we
set
got every
up-
right to.
Why don't you do this? Why don't you set up a time that you'll do this, notify everyone, and if anyone else has the ability to join, they will
Right.
join.
Yes.
Okay? And then based on that, we'll set up something, having him come in, probably in early May.
Okay, aim for the first meeting in May.
Yeah, first meeting in May. Okay?
Might I connect this to something else, just briefly?
I don't know.
Well, okay. When we had, I can't remember what they're called, T something or other. the
TW,
TW?
TW excavating.
Come in, all kinds of alarm bells went off in my head. Not in relation to them specifically, but in relation to the fact of where we sort of, Anyway, I would commend you to, since they told us where they're located, and they are located quite opposite the road that leads up to the Rowley Market Basket Plaza.
Yeah, I know where they are, yeah.
Yeah, I would commend you to look at an aerial photograph of their site,
Which you have done.
which I have done. And admittedly, the photograph is probably a year or two old, but I am not encouraged by what I see in two ways. One is it doesn't look very well sort of put together. And the other thing is it looks much less of a site than the one they're about to lease. And so if this is an expansion on their part, which is fine,
He clarified though before that that was not a site to go look at that was comparable to the type of business he was looking to establish. in
well,
Newbury.
okay, but,
Does anybody else remember that
I
comment?
do,
Yes,
I
I
do
remember.
remember it, but I didn't until you just mentioned it, so it wasn't strong in my
yeah,
mind.
it,
Did say it. He did say it.
he did say that, but,
Because I said, is there something we can look at?
right.
And he said, well, not really.
But to your point, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I mean, and I remembered that he had said that, but, and this is not directed at them and their business, but it would seem to me, given the experience we are having and have had for several months with a very similar situation, that we need to make sure that essentially what is being proposed can in fact be carried out, because otherwise we're going to have yet another site, potentially anyway, that perhaps takes a year or two to kind of get itself together, and it's going to make that corridor, as Weiss has been concerned about all along, the less.
But David, unfortunately, Newbury needs to realize that because there's no infrastructure down there and there isn't good quality soils, this is the type of business we're going to attract. Now this is the third business that's been established since we've rezoned. It's the third type of contractor, and it sounds like you said I don't know who's interested in the Drakowski property, but I can only assume it's
I'll bet you it's
similar.
something similar.
So, and then there's something I thought someone told me off the back of Boston Road across from the dump, which I'm guessing is similar. This is the type of business we're going to draw to.
That's right.
Well, okay,
And so what our option is to make it look as best we possibly can.
Right. So what I was thinking is that other communities, when faced with this sort of situation, talk about screening from the public highway, a bunch of things like this. And I think that part of the issue is that the 101 situation is so far from even dealing with those kinds of things, because isn't he supposed to build a wall or some sort
got a
there?
retaining
He's got a
Retaining
retaining wall, he's
Yeah.
got supposedly a building that's not
Plantings.
supposed to be that bad looking, he's
Right.
got
Birch trees.
birch trees,
Well,
I mean.
exactly. And so,
So we'll see.
I'm just raising this simply so that we don't sort of say, oh, yes, how nice to see you, goodbye, and then start dealing with the issues that are almost certain, frankly, to arise. So,
Well taken.
I don't see any reason why we couldn't just knock on the door there in Rowley and say, we're Newbury Planning Board, we'd like to go take a drive through your yard.
I'm sure we
I
can.
don't think they're not gonna say no.
no, well, I
Courtesy says you try to tell them you're on board. If you can't raise anybody,
well,
I just drive in.
okay, this does raise an interesting point, and this is relatively, I suppose, complex in a way, but if they're not owning the property and they're leasing it, then what you're dealing with is you're dealing with two issues. You're dealing with the fact that you have an owner who's becoming a landlord, who has been a landlord for some time, and somebody who's leasing. And the interesting thing is, where does the onus fall? Does it fall on the property owner, or does it fall on the?
It's all in the lease.
Yeah, but so what this means is working with people who both are renting out property and who are renters who are renting property.
Yep.
And I think every indication is that so far the town doesn't have a lot of experience in this area. And I would
agree with you.
I would point to yet another business on Route 1, which is this automobile business, which supposedly is some.
The internet business?
Yes.
Yes.
And I don't know whether anyone has been aware of this, but that seems to be growing somewhat like the great fungus of Wisconsin, in that it is now using areas for car storage,
Under the property.
way removed from the original property. Now, that may be perfectly fine with those people who own the property, it may be the same owner, but it seems to me that what you have is you have somebody who described a business in a way that may be perfectly legitimate and honest at the beginning, and he's now changed. And how, what do we do when that happens?
Right, well, I have seen that as it's evolved, and I just don't know the facts. You raised the point, has he made an agreement with the property owner next door to allow him to park there? We don't know that. If he has, then that's fine. If he hasn't, then there's encroachment and a problem.
Except when one of our permitting processes, okay, has to do with permitting a business based on what the business says it's going to do. And if you permit a business which says it may have, if you ask intelligent questions, it may have between, let's say, 10, 20, or 30 automobiles at any one time. If that now becomes 50 or 60, these are on a close to a site which is
But again,
sensitive
who has the
environmentally.
responsibility for doing that? And it
Yeah.
is not the planning board.
But there is a great concern though for safety because that's in the water protection district.
Yes.
So it isn't, I don't think, our responsibility.
Well,
but
because they
it is
never,
somebody's
that group never
responsibility.
came before us. We didn't
No.
issue anything for them. They came directly to the Board of Selectmen
Yes.
and said that they wanted to open a internet automobile business.
Right. However, at that point, we were in the process of rewriting the permitted uses on Route 1. And in all honesty, what they're doing falls into, or fell then, into a fairly gray sort of area.
So do all the businesses that come in front of us for that Route 1 area?
Yep,
Right.
every one of
Yeah,
them.
yeah. So, again, I'm just raising this because it seems to me that we have spent, as a board, a long time and a great deal of energy and effort, particularly you, Kathleen, but all the rest of us, frankly, going through all those lists. And so if suddenly, ultimately, they don't mean anything, and anyone can trundle in there and do any sort of business they feel, they want to, you have to wonder why we spent all that time.
We can draft zoning, but we're not in charge of enforcing it, is what it comes down to.
Yeah, I mean, it's the issue, I mean, I've said this 100 times, that we allow all the uses out on Route 1, and we will get all the uses out on Route 1. Instead of targeting to specific kinds of uses, and we can't do that until we get the utilities out there. And then you can maybe get something. In the meantime, just what everyone has said at the table tonight, we're going to get these kinds of uses. And so the thing is that we have to make them
Beautify them.
as best as we possibly can to change the image of Route 1 so that eventually somebody will come in when we get utilities out there and say, oh, this isn't that bad a place, we can invest in here. But right now, you're getting these kinds of uses.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, thank you for listening.
No, it's,
You're right,
we hate
You
to
are
say
right.
that, you hate to say that you're right, David, but you're right.
but you're right.
Okay, new business, master plan. So can I proceed with this now?
Well,
Yeah. So Martha, David, and I have been meeting on and off for about 4 or 5 months. And we started off by taking the summary list of recommendations and strategies that were part of the master plan document at the end. I don't know, 30 or 40 pages.
yeah, that's great.
And went through that and looked at it from the perspective of, well, what's been accomplished, and those you'll see are going to be in green. What have been worked on, and we want to carry forward, and those are pink. What do we think is valid to bring forward, and those you'll see in blue. What are things that we don't think should move forward at all anymore because they're no longer relevant, or we haven't been able to move forward on them for a number of reasons, and those are just black. And then finally, new issues are in red. So what we wanted to do tonight was go through this and get your response to this. We've had a discussion with Tracy about it, and she's interested in looking at the accomplishments. I did note, by the way, that I didn't see anything for the updating the master plan in the budget that was reviewed. Am I correct?
She mentioned it at the selectmen's meeting.
Did it? It just
last
wasn't
week.
reported. Wasn't reported in the paper, so there
Okay,
is some
yeah,
money in
yeah.
there?
She's proposing that there's some money in there,
Okay.
whether it actually makes it onto the warrant.
Okay,
The
so
selectmen
let's
are-
see what happens.
Selectmen are going to vote next Tuesday on the articles to be on the warrant.
Okay. So,
Oh, this is the old, if I can just jump in here
Yes.
quickly. This is the old introduction, and I just put in red, which doesn't show up too well on the screen, but it basically is the section which is right up here. You can see my cursor, I think, moving
Yeah.
up there. Just to remind people that what follows in terms of these descriptions, okay, these, in other words, the bold, okay, they were pulled from the original collection of goals, and they may not now reflect where we've ended up. And I think people just need to be aware of the fact that that's a summary of the old set of priorities.
When we say old, from the master plan, which was
Yeah.
published in 2005 or 6, or
Right,
whenever that was.
right. And, you know, I don't say we've abandoned the notion of preserving the town's scenic landscapes and rural character, which is number one there, but it may be that some of the stuff that comes later might be in a different order or whatever. So to move to what John was describing here are the first set of items. And just so you see, what you see here is 1.1 is something we've carried forward, but was not done, okay, and isn't active.
Go ahead.
So you took the existing master plan
Yeah,
and you've changed, this is a different table?
No,
Same
this is
table,
the same
table.
Yeah.
And you're just highlighting things accomplished and not
We,
accomplished or whatever.
we've
that's
made
all.
judgments,
yeah,
Okay.
and what you're reading is our judgments at this point in time,
right.
and 3 people who looked at it. That's all it is.
Okay.
Okay, and so here you see an example in 1.3 of a totally new item. This was not in the original plan, though it's not totally new in the sense that it's work in an area that we've always sort of been aware of. Then you see item 2.2 down here, okay, and the thing is that this is an item which we've carried forward as an active item, and it's also something where we have been doing stuff as a board since this plan was
That would be you,
accepted by the
Kathleen.
community, and particularly you, Kathleen. And so again, down here, identifying potential pollution sources for possible future action, that essentially goes on in the community anyway. And so that's what, and you will see that under means and implementation, we've added a couple of things. The red here, work with the Parker River Clean Water Association and the state. And here we've added a category of commercial underground fuel storage tanks and other pollution sources. And since the Stormwater Committee wasn't extant in 2006, they appear in various places as a new entry. So that's, and this is the.
Wait, before you go.
Right, sure, yep.
Any questions from anyone on this first page about what, we're gonna try to go through as much as we can, and then, can you make copies for everyone so they can, you have them?
I've got some.
So you can take them home and digest them and get our comments to us.
And what we're gonna be reviewing is whether or not we'd like to keep this.
You'll get it as we go through, right. In other words, do you agree, you'll probably agree with the green ones, which is, these are the ones we accomplished, but what about the ones that we are saying we should keep? You know,
And that's what I'm saying, some of them might go away, right?
Some of the-
Because
Yes.
I think some of them have to go away.
Some of them should go away.
Yeah,
Okay.
right,
So,
sure.
right.
We just felt that it was very difficult to not arbitrarily, but to say something shouldn't be there when this was the result of several years of work and a questionnaire to the town and so on,
I understand.
okay? So if we're happy to go on, we'll go on to the next page. Where, okay, now this is the first page with all of our different coding here. And you will see that the Stormwater Committee got added to what is an active, because it's purple and blue, that means we carried it forward, and because should be carried forward, and
That's
also it's
appropriate.
active. Similarly with 3.2. And we.
Excuse me, David, I just checked with Steve.
Yeah.
He's trying occasionally to zoom in on this. Because
Okay.
the view from there is not visible too well, so occasionally he'll zoom in, so just
Okay.
spend a little time on
I'm
this.
going to, I
and
just
so
need to
people can see it.
assemble.
Collating them.
Yes.
Okay. And so with 3.2, we added not only the Stormwater Committee, which I obviously did the wrong thing there, but we also added the town administrator because that's a revenue issue. And this, I think, is a good example of where we've tried to be reasonably comprehensive. 3.4, educate the public, two publics there, about the proper disposal of hazardous household materials. Obviously, you don't stop doing that, you continue to. However, one of the goals was open recycling at the transfer station to all residents at low or no cost, which is exactly what has happened in the last 12 months. And interestingly, we could have added in there, it's also been open to anybody to you know, because it's a revenue producer for the people who operate it. And we did indeed adopt a town stormwater management bylaw, which is the next green item. But you'll notice that the one underneath is not green, not because we haven't done it, but because we should continue promoting low-impact development.
It's ongoing.
Yeah,
Right.
It's not one where will ever be done.
right, exactly.
Okay.
And if we move from goal number 3 to 4, you'll notice we've simply done a little edit there and said revise and refile a current local open space plan. The reason for that is that at the time, in 2006, we confidently expected that we would have one filed for various reasons which are not part of the discussion tonight. That never happened, and so it needs revision because it isn't quite up to date.
Is that the one that was drafted but never approved?
Yes, what happened was it was drafted, it was never approved for official filing, but what Martha did very cogently was to share it with the state. And what is the official thing they accepted it as?
Conditionally approved.
Yeah, it was conditionally approved, so that, you know, that's better than nothing,
What
but,
does that mean?
Right.
Conditionally approved.
Well, it means
What
that
it
it's
says.
still.
Just what it says.
Yeah, needed to go through the, you know, the
There are
final.
conditions.
They'll
Yeah.
have conditions. There will be
Right.
conditions.
because,
conditions.
in all honesty, open space plans have a somewhat checkered history across the state. And there are occasions when the state actually just refuses it and turns it right back. So what they were saying was, yes, you have a plan that passes, you know, the hurdles it has to pass at the state level. But it never got officially filed. And so the town never adopted it at town meeting, which should have happened. Okay, so now here's the first time, here's the bottom, 4.4, right down here. We have engage outside expertise and funds to purchase priority open space parcels. Partner with nonprofit land trusts to extend municipal buying power for preserving open space. And I think it was our general agreement that we are in a point with open space in this town where that kind of specific activity really isn't required.
Because we have so much of it? Or
Because we have a great deal of it, and also because because I think there's a real question as to whether you want to acquire it, meaning own it, or whether you want to preserve it.
I see, yes.
Okay, which you can do in different ways through people like Essex County Greenbelt, and that indeed has been happening over the last several years. So we didn't give this a current status, we didn't give it an ongoing status. We basically left it in there so that you could decide, but I think our decision is it should essentially be removed, not as a aspiration, but as a goal. and by that I mean if people want to conserve their land and put it into conservation, that's fine. But I don't think the town should be actively pursuing that as an
Or
activity.
spending town funds to do
Yeah.
so.
Right.
I think that's, fair,
So
okay?
do we have the plan that Martha, that you sent to the state, does that have well, it wouldn't have current, list of, an inventory of all the open space in town?
It does have one
Yeah.
that was current as of, that time, so,
Does.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
right, yeah, and that was the source you remember when you worked on the
Towns,
the committee to sell surplus town
Yeah.
properties? A lot of the information that I got to you and others got to you came from sources like that,
okay.
because it had been inventoried. So we do have a pretty reasonable inventory.
I was wondering if I thought it was lacking, not knowledge of the actual document. I was concerned that we didn't have a good view of what was actually protected.
Oh,
Because
no,
that doesn't include what residents have protected on their own property.
Yes,
It
oh, yeah.
does.
It's a comprehensive listing. It includes all of the conservation lands which are in permanent conservation, like the state, the federal, and the trustees, for example. Essex County Greenbelt, which is both owned by them or held by them as conservation restriction. It also includes 61A, 61B, agricultural, so,
Oh, that's
yeah.
wonderful.
We have Dan Streeter particularly to thank for that. He
What's
works,
the percentage of the town that is so?
that's the 43-something% of the town, yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's
I-
only
and that
43%,
Well, that doesn't include some of the private stuff where it's just the CR.
but that includes the marshes.
Yes, yeah, but
I
I,
thought you were 60% undeveloped.
undeveloped, that's
That would then
Different.
include-
That's different, because you can own a whole lot of the marsh, which is undevelopable, but it may not be in conservation.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Okay.
The marsh is not in conservation.
Because there is a misunderstanding in the community that we have much more land than we actually have. You know,
Oh, that's
because people-
developable, right,
Yes, and that's
yes.
what I'm trying to figure out.
Yeah,
So
well,
it's not
okay, I think the deal is the numbers are something like, we have something like, I think, 18 to 20%, which is developed in some way or another. We have another similar amount, about 20%, which is developable, question mark. And then we have 40%, which is already in conservation, so it can't be. And then there's the final, that's 80.
Yeah,
Add
so
up the
another
numbers.
20, yeah.
And the last 20 is your marshes, your wetlands, all of the stuff which is not developable under our current rules and
That's
regulations.
the 60%, okay.
Yeah,
That makes
Yeah,
sense.
yeah,
Alright.
so that gets you to the figure you had there. Okay, so next section here is,
Oh, wait a minute.
Whoops.
No, I think you
What?
missed some things.
The
Because you got
CPA,
the, adopt the Community Preservation Act.
oh, okay,
Oh, I
well,
see. I
that was
just-
originally
no,
there.
you're right, you're done.
Yeah, that
You're
was
done.
originally there, yeah. Okay, so we get a lot more green here, and this is because of our agricultural commission, et cetera. But staying with the water world, which is section 4, you notice that all of the 3 there, 4, 6, 7, and 8, we consider to be ongoing currently and should stay in. And they are increasing the protection of wetland buffer areas, inventorying and priorities inland and estuarine wetland habitats, and preserve natural stream courses, floodplains, and flow regimes. I must say, I've got one of those right across my driveway right now. Okay, notice again, we've added something, and that's partnering with Parker River Clean Water under the preservation of stream courses, et cetera. That's something they're very interested in. They're also, of course, very interested in the stuff swimming in the streams. And the green there is the updating of the FEMA and FIRM maps. And indeed, we have been, both at their instigation and ours, working with them. So when we say that's done, I think we maybe, I thought about this the other day, we might need to sort of say done for now, in the sense that it's going to be an ongoing process. And clearly, the frequency has been, what, every 2 decades? Something like
Last one
that?
had been, I think, 85, so.
Yeah,
it was,
so
yeah.
let's say every 2 decades
2.5
or a little bit
decades.
more. I think it's gonna come down to being every decade or 5 years, actually. So, okay. Goal number 5 was preserve prime agricultural land and working farms. And we had a little, I think, discussion about this as to whether we truly should green 5.1 or not, which is enhance the viability of local working farms by minimizing unnecessary regulatory hurdles. That language, I must say, came from essentially the state, well, it came actually from Merrimack Valley Planning Commission via them. I don't know that we've streamlined anything in the regulatory process for Newbury farmers specifically. But I think that because we have the second item, which is establishing a local agricultural commission, which has created the forum for addressing issues in the whole farming area, I think we felt that 5.1 really had been accomplished. But you might feel otherwise.
The only other thing that we could hang our hat on the 5.1 was the new requirement when you buy a property
Yes.
in Newbury, that you sign an affidavit saying you are aware that this is an agricultural community and that you're basically giving up your rights to bring suit, et cetera, against the agricultural functions that are here. That's not a regulatory thing, but it's an important step, so that people, when they move here, really are fully aware that that's something that the town wants to pursue. So that's the only thing that we felt could fit in there that didn't fit anywhere else.
I did actually just quickly talk to one of our farmers about that, and he made the point that if you look at 5.4, which is the other green one down here, okay, we adopted a right to farm bylaw, which is the stuff that John's just mentioned. And what that means is that a farmer doesn't have to get too concerned about, for example, starting livestock in an area where there hasn't been livestock before, because the smells will upset the neighbors.
Right.
Obviously, he or she wants to remain, in good odor with the neighbors. Sorry about the pun. But at the same time, they're not open to suit, which is what the force of that law is. So that's, okay, what we did take out, facilitate purchase of development rights to preserve farmland. This really has not worked in any communities in any very notable way throughout the state, though it is a tool that's available for communities to use. And so we feel, I think, that it's not something that this community should focus on at this point, given our general economic situation, if that's sort of fairly fair. And who knows, I mean, where would the money come from? The state right now is not providing money for that kind of thing. It is providing money in some instances, but it's been very small for agricultural conservation monies. But we haven't had any here, I think, in this community in a long time, right? Because the Colbys were refused, weren't they?
I don't know.
I think so, yeah. I don't know whether about recently, but they were a couple of years ago. Okay, going down here. Here's some stuff for John O'Connell. Okay. I think we're all agreed about continuing to preserve the OSRD and to push it, and that's 6.1. And we've added the building commissioner in there because he should have been there all along, or he or she should have been there all along. 6.2, now, that's encouraging the incorporation of green building techniques and site design, all types of development and redevelopment projects. Looking at formally adopting the stretch code, I don't know, what do we think about that? John Weiss's comment was, well, sort of most people are doing it anyway. Is that true?
I couldn't say, to be honest with you. I don't really, I'm out of the loop on that end of the design process for any building. I am seeing more and more insulation, more and more concern about thermal efficiencies of buildings, energy conservation, but a great deal of that is a function of the building code getting tighter and tighter all the time.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah.
Now, what's your thoughts on that? You're closer to it than I, probably.
Not that much. I know, I can't remember how many communities have qualified for green community status, and adopting the stretch code is one component of that. Yeah, and there are arguments on both sides, because it is also more costly to do that. And I believe that the 2012 building code actually came up to the standards of the original stretch code anyway, so I don't know.
Yeah, it'd be something I certainly wouldn't jump into without a study. I mean, we need to look into it. We just don't want to say we're going to go with a stretch code. I wouldn't be against exploring it, because
Right.
there's absolutely, it's like motherhood and apple pie, you cannot be against energy conservation.
One
Yeah.
approach would be to talk to the builders who are active in town, Mark,
Yeah.
DePiero, and others, and ask them what they're doing
Yeah.
in their designs and their construction. And that will be some kind of information that would help us say, well, are things being done? My sense is, I'm not sure if it's in Newbury, but generally in the metropolitan area, that developers are being overly sensitive to the wants of their clients, especially young first-time home buyers who really want this stuff. It's just, they want everything energy efficient, they want green buildings, they want sustainable designs, and to the extent that they can do it, they're doing it. So, even though it adds cost.
Yeah.
Want me to track down some people and get opinions? Is that what you
Right.
said? Sure.
My sense would be that the economics of new houses in Newbury are such that the increased cost probably isn't as important a factor as it might be elsewhere. In other words, if we were looking at people trying to provide affordable housing, one might raise the issue of the increased cost of the stretch code, but I think, given what I see built around where I live anyway, that if people can afford, this is one of my pet peeves, to burn a light at the end of their driveway all night, right? They can afford to put in, 2x8s or whatever it might be to insulate their house. So, enough said. Okay. I'm astonished, though, the number of people who do not think that leaving their lights on at night affects anybody or anything. Okay, most of these are continued, increasing public awareness about septic system management, expanding environmental education, and exploring opportunities to host environmental workshops and seminars. What we did throw in there new is Triton School District as because of the environmental workshop and seminar idea. I think John has had some contact with the elementary school. I think perhaps there could be more. One thing we did sort of leave out, because we felt it was just really repeating item number 1 at the top there, 7.1, is 7.4, increasing public awareness. It just was saying the same thing.
We also added stormwater committee, but you didn't put it in the red, but to
Oh,
both
okay.
7.1 and 7.3.
Yeah. Okay,
Because that's
right.
pretty much the stuff
Right.
that John's been talking about.
Yeah,
Yes.
that, by the way, is our focus pretty much for the next year. Every water we discharge to is impaired, and the impairment in every case is pathogens, which speaks to mostly septic systems.
Right.
And so that seems like, while we don't have a total maximum daily load imposed on us yet, there's a draft out there, and the chances are, when they get around to it, they will. And,
Does that
try to
also?
get a head start on that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
is part of all that also lawn, garden fertilizers and agricultural fertilizers?
It's the same principle, but fertilizing your lawn doesn't necessarily increase the pathogen level. What it
No.
does tend to do is increase
Nitrogen.
the
Right, which interestingly, I've
Healthy.
been reading lately, creates healthier pathogens, meaning
Well,
that,
not necessarily. There are harmful
Right.
algae as well
Uh-huh.
that will kill you.
right,
But what it basically does, it creates dead zones because
well, no,
algae
that's-
is really nice while
right.
it's living.
That's what I meant.
However, when it dies, it rots and sucks up all the dissolved
Yeah.
oxygen, and now nothing can live there.
that's what I meant by healthier pathogens.
Well,
It was
yeah,
yeah, in other words, the
otherwise,
pathogens
no
were,
pathogens,
right,
yeah.
yeah.
So, John, as you go through this document over the next week, you might want to look, we have these as low priorities, and I'm wondering, you might want to adjust.
Yes.
That was simply taken from the master plan. We
Yeah.
did, we
Right,
didn't
we didn't.
opine on that.
Sure.
But where you see stormwater committee, whether or not those remain low or medium or high, you might want to make some judgments
Sure.
on those, okay?
Sure.
Okay, all right, John Weiss, why don't you talk about 7.5 in red there at the bottom?
So, we believe that one of the major missing elements to the master plan done in really early 2000 was the whole issue of addressing sea level rise, storm surge, and the like. And so, we tried to come up with language that was as unbiased as possible, while at the same time acknowledging the fact that we think that we really need to aggressively go after it. So what we say here is develop consensus about the most likely short and long-term increases of sea level and its possible impacts to the natural and the man-made environment on Plum Island and to the properties adjacent to the wetlands and the Merrimack and the Parker River. And that the strategy would be to contract with a consultant to get unbiased data as to the most likely short and long-term predictions for the sea level rise for Newbury's community, and interpret the data and develop and revise local codes accordingly. So it makes it, I mean, I've seen an awful lot about sea level rise, and it really deals with a lot of large-scale kinds of issues.
Large-scale kinds of fluctuations and predictions.
I
too.
mean, I've seen everything from 9 inches to 6 feet.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right.
You know,
That's
and-
what the range is right now.
And I've seen some, there was an article in the Globe, did you see that article that, was it on Monday, or about the sea level rise solution around New York Harbor? And anyway, it was part of a HUD-funded group, and I mean, these people are thinking big-time stuff. You know, what you do in the Netherlands and creating new islands in New York Harbor at a cost of, $10 billion and
Don't
stuff
think
like
we're
that.
gonna do that,
you
you
know.
know.
And so I was thinking, well, what do we do here? And actually, the main thing I did learn from that session that I went to at the Lincoln Land Institute was that thinking regionally about this and acting regionally is not a bad way to go. And so the role of MVPC and their ability to pull Salisbury, and just as Bruce Tarr does for the Merrimack River group, might not be a bad way to start thinking about getting this thing done and using the Merrimack River folks to bring everything, I guess, from Ipswich up to Salisbury.
Yeah.
And come together, because the impacts will be the same from Ipswich to Salisbury, and maybe start there. So that's about as far as we've gotten with our thinking on that.
Well, there is an organization called Eight Towns in the Bay, which is basically accomplishes.
What do they do? What do they do?
Well, essentially, they have been talking over the last, decade or so about all kinds of common issues and problems from, for example, the pollution created by people dumping their human waste into the sea off their boats because there are no
Right.
pump-out stations,
Right.
to
Big deal.
dealing with invasives in the marsh, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the reasons I think essentially that they've been successful in trying to talk about some of these issues in a much broader context is by bringing together communities from Gloucester all the way up through Salisbury. And I think even some of the New Hampshire towns are at least
But I would
nominally
be
involved.
interested to find out, or David, if you want to approach Dennis and see if is there something that MVPC might think about doing on this?
Well, one of their staff people is in fact essentially the driving force behind Eight Towns in the Bay. That's Peter Phippen, and he's the person who's been working among other people with Jeff Walker, our selectman, and they've been out,
And the Phragmites.
yes, killing the Phragmites in the marsh, which is another, one of their programs. But yes, it makes sense. Part of the issue, I think, here is also that if you begin to look at this, what we're going to look at, I think, ultimately is about, a couple of sessions ago, John O'Connell said, well, maybe we should have
A
a
moratorium.
moratorium on building on Plum Island, right?
Yeah, if we can, I don't know if we can.
Well,
you know?
interestingly, but if you even want to entertain a conversation about that, what you've got to do is have the kind of information which is being talked
You
about
can
in
only
this
do it
item.
with facts, and you
Yeah.
can't do it just
Right.
because you think it'd be a nice idea.
Right, of course.
But I think one of the things that is, one of the elephants in the room is the water system out on the island.
Oh, that's so
Wh-
jeopardized.
Which is, there are a lot of unknowns there. The Newburyport clearly is about to sue,
Contractor, it's a camp dresser.
well, 2 or 3
That's the
contractors.
engineer.
I think the engineers, CRM, a bunch of people.
Everybody.
Plus, if the news reports are at all true, if they're gonna have to replace the connections to half of the hydrants on the island, I mean, all of this kind of stuff simply to me raises the issue that don't you begin to have a really good reason to say, wait a minute, before we go on adding people, to this community, we really need to know whether the infrastructure is even functional for what's there. So, anyway,
So let me, how long has Bruce Tarr's group been going on, John?
How long is what?
That group that meets at Peter Hall with Bruce Tarr,
Oh,
how long has he been?
oh,
probably 3 or 4 years anyway, isn't it?
Since Mrs. What's-its house fell in the ocean, right?
Mrs. Bizzata, that was.
Yes,
that was
yes.
2008.
Yeah,
Yeah.
since about
6 years
2008.
ago then. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, when her house fell in the ocean, which had, well, it actually was pushed. And part of the reason I think that a lot of things came together was because the town had to make a decision which had lots of repercussions, and a lot of things at that point got very noisy. And that's when that group started. And that's when the push to repair the southern jetty came onto,
And
and all of those
Was
things.
Bruce always the organizer?
What happened, as I understand it, is that they invited him because he's our senator. He is not Newburyport or Salisbury's. That's somebody else who has subsequently retired.
Yeah, that would be.
Because we now have a
Lenny Mira.
new.
Lenny Mira
well,
There are Lenny Mira's.
Lenny Mira is
the
that.
rep.
no,
Who's
but
the
the
rep?
senator
I think it was
is.
Costello was their senator.
what?
It's Costello, no,
No,
Baddour?
no.
That's Newburyport.
Oh, isn't that Connor Ives?
Yes,
No,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, but
Right, yeah, she is.
prior to that, I can't think of the man's name, he was the chairman of the Transportation
Steve
Committee.
Baddour. Steve Baddour.
Steve Baddour, who was quite muscular in terms of his, standing in the legislature. And what happened was, as I understand it, essentially, Tar saw that there was a vacuum in terms of leadership and organization, and stepped in and sort of said,
Oh, he's done a marvelous job.
Yeah,
Great facilitator.
kidding
that
me?
he would be the chairperson.
He's one of the best facilitators
Right.
I've ever seen.
Right. And part of the reason I think there was that there were a lot of non-community players. There was,
Oh, right,
everybody you could
right.
think of from the state. There was the Army Corps of
Army Corps,
Engineers.
right.
And it became very clear, frankly, that until all of this happened, those guys really had not been talking to one another in the same room for years. So it was remarkable
Okay.
that happened.
Well, I'm going
We
to ask
should-
us,
right.
I know that I asked you to slow down before, but
Yeah.
now I'm going to ask
Ask
you
me
to
to
move.
speed up.
To speed up because it's
Okay,
8:15.
well, I think, yeah, okay, so here we get.
So you're getting the
37
idea of what we've done
Yeah.
here.
I think they're pretty clearly the green ones. This is cultural and historic resources. The 375th Committee is gone. We are preserving agricultural landscapes with an agricultural commission and the right to farm bylaw. And the transfer of development rights program is black because later on we will explain why we want to take that out. Okay, the demolition delay bylaw is, in process, we hope, in the hands of the Historic Commission. The Planning Board is really advisory in this role, apparently, although I have learned that the Planning Board actually could do their own. Not this Planning Board necessarily, but any Planning Board can. Okay, I think one of the interesting things here is what I would love to see us do as a board is something John talked about earlier, which is to review the importance level. You notice that some of these are high, some of them are medium, some of them are low. It may be that they're all about the same, and you will notice that a lot of these 3.3, 3.4, and 3.5, we have decided, frankly, are not targets of our kind of energy in the next, 5 years or so.
Right.
Okay, so if we go on here, whoops, didn't mean to go quite so fast. Okay,
Yeah, this is the end, that's right.
yeah, it is the end, okay. And preserving the town's historic documents is something we left in there is because that is important, and it's particularly important because we don't have a place that really is safe to store them these days.
Appropriate place.
Right, or appropriate, anyway. Okay, if we look at housing now, we can pat ourselves on the back, I think, for 1.1. We have adopted an accessory apartment bylaw. We've not only adopted it, but we've revised it.
amended it.
Yeah, wow,
And I
mean,
had some
right.
feedback for you. I recently talked to a couple people who have put on, or in the process of putting on, in-law apartments. And I asked them if they found it difficult with the size requirements for the apartment or
Yeah.
any of the procedures, and they said no, they were happy with it.
great, great.
Because
Okay.
we're really
Good.
smart guys.
We have
Doubted us.
also allowed 3+ unit structures by special permit. 3-unit, in other words, we moved towards multiple units as opposed to 1 and 2, which are our previous limits. Okay, we then get into the whole area of housing development. And that, I think, if I might suggest, John, is almost a topic all of its own.
Well, this whole thing, encourage housing development, see, this is a housing section. And it says, determine the feasibility of redevelopment of Route 1, Hanover Street, Middle Street area to include housing. That's from the old document. Then it says, continue joint study with Newburyport Transit or TOD in the area, and it says, item needs review. And it just seems that any development that's gonna happen there, I guess I always imagined would be a mixed use kind of project, combining ideally retail, housing, and office. And so the question is, just as a element that was part of this, should we continue saying that we want to push housing on that site? Which is, I assume, the old Little River site, right?
Yeah, essentially.
Right.
That area, yeah.
I mean, the goal is economic development, isn't it, for that location? Or is it to address affordable housing at the same time?
No, well, I think it's economic, I've always thought it was economic development, but I always thought that that original plan called for a mixed-use project. That's
Because
all.
at the time, we were trying to address the affordable housing.
Yeah.
Well, also frankly, because that was the way that they could put the project together. The chances of getting funding, the whole way of using 40R and what's the other one?
40B.
40S, was it?
40B, isn't it?
Well, no, they weren't gonna, no, it didn't have to be a 40B.
My concern now
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
is that if we're really looking to focus on economic development, we're not looking necessarily for there to be housing on that site. It's not a necessity to us. It might be a necessity to a developer, but for us, it is not a necessity at this time. We do hear, though, that there is a need for additional affordable housing.
Yeah,
And if we're ever gonna have water and sewer, that's probably the best location that we're going to get it.
And so then the question is, if we actively push for a housing project here, whether it's by the, I don't know this, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, is affordable housing taxed?
Why wouldn't it be?
Well,
it's-
because in California, it's not.
oh.
They don't pay real estate taxes, so I don't know the answer to that.
I think they
oh,
do.
yeah, yeah.
Are they?
Here,
Yeah, I
yeah.
don't think there's any exclusion.
Yeah,
Well, that would be a killer right there.
that'd be a killer right there, right?
Yeah, that would be.
But let's assume that it does pay taxes, and so, do you want, hypothetically, you could lose all that land, which could be commercial development, to housing. And that wouldn't be what we want to have happen.
But interestingly, the only
Take anything these days.
development that's happened, well, that's on the books to happen, on the MBTA lots in Newburyport is indeed rental housing, right?
I think it's 67 units of rental housing.
Yeah, well, now, the pattern that the state has been pushing, and therefore I think there are probably tax breaks for developers and other kinds of things, is that kind of development around transit hubs.
Right.
And the station is a transit hub, and in fact, one of the reasons for the village at Little River being, a very attractive proposition to all the parties involved except for the town, was just that you could, walk to the train station, and, nothing really changes in terms of the location. It's still there. So it might well be that somebody could see that as an area for a real mixture of housing with some small commercial development.
I personally liked the proposed development that was there on a smaller scale.
Right.
Why can't we readjust this, instead of saying just for housing, that we want a mixed-use housing project on the Route 1 Hanover Street, Middle Street area? Let's not focus on housing. That gives us the ability to be flexible, and that if we got a great housing proposal with a little bit of retail, that would work. If we got a great office project with a little bit of retail, I mean, it allows you to
We're not,
do anything you want.
it's not zone right now for that though, is it? I can't remember.
I think it would be a special zone. You'd have
Yeah,
to,
it
Yeah.
would have to be rezoned.
it'd have to be rezoned.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean,
That would
that,
be a planned unit development or something
right,
like that.
that's what it was gonna be anyway.
Right, right.
Right.
So I think that's okay.
Yeah.
So I would just, I think that we should change this language to make it mixed use. You don't need to do it right now, but let's do that.
No, well, I can't because it's a PDF.
Oh, okay.
Okay, the next one, 2.2, transfer of development rights seems to be a dead horse in that there have been a few instances of this throughout the state. None of them have seemed to be particularly successful to the point that, you know, it's being trumpeted. I think there have been some difficulties with it. I think, based on, I think it was the Pioneer Institute's standards, as a community, we don't have the right mix of stuff. We don't have the right mix of pieces of land which might be parts of a transfer equation. So that's one of the reasons why we thought this should be taken out of the master plan at this point, so it's black. Emphasize 2.3, the green there, we've done that, we've adopted village zoning in Byfield. So, okay. I think nobody's, we're looking here at supporting and expanding elderly housing. Well, the problem is, how do we do that?
We don't have a department for.
We don't have a department for that. There's no money out there specifically from the state or the feds for that. I think it's a situation where we wouldn't be against it, but on the other hand, our energies probably shouldn't be directed towards it.
Well, what you could say is support any proposals from the private sector to expand elderly housing.
Right,
Instead
okay.
of, right?
Yeah, right.
This is where the master plan gets confusing, because we obviously, that would be a benefit. But are we supposed to put things, anything, I guess it is.
Well, this would be, we would then change that from black and say blue, and then new language, which would be red, saying this is new.
Yeah,
You know, and take it to the town and see if the town agrees with us that
Okay.
we're changing, we're recommending that the language from the master plan be changed from what you had there to this new language.
right. And 3.2, which is housing rehab, there is currently no way we can qualify for that kind of monies. And we did have a program through the state for a little while, but we don't qualify, and currently, I think, nor does Newburyport, because the rules are being changed. So that we took out. We go to 4.1.
Not that we wanted to take it out, by the way, but
Right. Yeah, I mean, we're just trying to be realistic. 4.1 we left in. It's a nice portmanteau phrase. We're not quite sure what it means, which is protect against the erosion of property rights by zoning is what we put in there, and land use regulations, because originally it said, I think, just land use regulations, which didn't make an awful lot of sense. So we added zoning. 5.1, independent permanent housing organization in town. Again, that seems to be a non-starter given the current environment, financially and otherwise, not only in the town, but outside of the town.
I don't understand how we could do 5.2.
Begin necessary, how we left it in?
well,
But,
let me, we
Yeah.
went over this, and when this document first came, after we went through it, we had it as black and not blue, and felt that it was important in terms of the state to show that we are continuing to try to do something, that if you took it out, it would basically saying, you know,
they'd find it offensive.
we
Okay.
we give up.
All right. But it's
Yeah.
not very realistic.
Yes, you're right.
Well,
We would need somebody to step out of the blue and say they want to do a 40B, or we could maybe, we may be able to do an inclusionary housing policy with the inclusionary zoning. I mean, it might be possible to get that through. I think you sent that note out. I think I might want to go to that in May and just see if it's worth a shot. I know it's very difficult to pull off.
It would be interesting to see what they say, though.
I mean, just look at all, I mean,
Yeah.
in the 3 years since I've been here, I mean, what did we approve, 15 new houses or something like that?
Yeah, not very many.
Martha, we have to have, what is the percentage of affordable houses, like 10% we
It's
have to have?
10%.
It's supposed to be 10, we've got 3.
3.48.
Yeah.
We have 3.48, we don't have the infrastructure in town to support it.
Nope.
It's going to be, and developers
Right.
take a loss.
Right.
Right, yeah. But, okay, one of the things that we, for example, could do, because this happens from time to time, and that is, for example, we could have somebody look at whether it would be possible to generate a housing plan, which is one of the ways of kind of holding off the state a little bit, okay? Now, what I've heard, Merrimack has just gone through this process, and it was done by MVPC, basically, for them, as part of, the services they provide. And one of the discussions that came up as a sidebar was the fact that you could go through the exercise of preparing a housing plan to find out that you really can't generate a housing plan. Do you follow me?
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
in other
Yes,
words, it's
yes.
not really possible. And if you've done that, then at least you can say, well, unless you can change these conditions, we really can't have.
It's really primarily our
Yeah.
infrastructure.
Now, it really, one of the things we talked about at the commission was, well, we don't want to waste staff's time if it's clear that that would be the end point of the generation of a plan. But if in the process you discover some important things about a community and also communities in general that negate practical housing plans, then actually it's worth staff time. And so the whole thing right now is up in the air.
I think that would be,
That is a plan.
Great idea.
That's a
good.
plan, that's not no, that's a strategy.
Yeah, it is, right, it is. Okay, so 5.3, we need to revise that in terms of what might we do to work with who could we work with? We don't really know at this point, because a lot of those housing groups that were pretty active, even 10 years ago, are now either gone or essentially moribund. Okay. The nice thing is, the last one of these, which is with the green there, we have indeed maintained a full-time planner position and support assets, and we developed it and maintained it, and we need to do that.
yes,
Right,
Martha, thank you,
yes.
Martha.
Thank you for not getting fired.
Right.
That's
Right.
much appreciated.
Yeah, yeah.
Doesn't
Okay,
sound
and
so bad.
talking
Well,
to,
there's a record of the converse.
right, talking to Kathleen's question earlier, 5.5 there, identify town-owned property suitable for affording housing. We've not done that specifically, but.
But again, we should do it.
But, well, interestingly, they've identified town-owned property twice as, 3 times, 10 times as well as it was done when this report was written in 2006. Because frankly, the committee you served on with Chuck
Yes.
about
The
surplus
dissolution,
properties.
yep.
Think of all the stuff that they found out about stuff that the size, the fact it was underwater, all of
Yeah,
these
they
things.
had all these properties, but there was really nothing.
Yeah, there was really nothing there of any substance except the famous 5 acres, right?
Well, it was really Kathleen who. put
Yeah, well, it
together,
was,
so.
exactly. A one-woman effort, right? Among her others. Okay, let's move on to
Accomplishments is just so incredible.
You know, I'm
economic
sitting here.
development. John, you want to do this?
Oh, excuse me.
Yes, it's all right.
Yeah, so in terms of economic development, we think that these 4 elements have been accomplished. Preserve and encourage village centers for the mixed use and higher densities. We did that. Establish village center zoning in Byfield and Old Town. Review and approve new commercial development. We did that. We permitted permit uses in Parker River, Route 1A, done that. Encourage farming and related businesses. So, this section really, the board really has done a lot. And so we have a new one that we wanted to put forward, which I think was discussed maybe a month and a half ago or 2 months. And it was, in looking at what's going on Route 1A with some small businesses, in particular the one down near the bridge. And the wording on this is an important one. Explore along Route 1A, High Road, tourist-oriented business overlay district. And so we're thinking that we clearly don't want to encourage what has happened or we envision happening on Route 1, but it's really the kinds of businesses that have evolved on 1A is to maybe encourage a couple more of those. So
Such
whether-
as, just explain to the public.
Well, such as the, I guess it's an antique shop at the Parker River Bridge. The art galleries, there are even farming and farm stands. All of those things we think should be encouraged. And so the question is, do we want to really make that as a major work item and explore that? So I think, Kathleen, you're the one who first brought this up. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea.
I do too.
Are you signing me something yet?
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Not yet. George, what do you think?
I think it's a great idea, too. I mean, there's not much down there. I don't know how many tourists you will draw,
Actually, you'd be surprised.
but it will begin to develop
Route
as you get
1A
more.
gets so many people on a weekend that drive, just
Yeah,
for the
they
sake of
just,
driving.
because it's such a pretty drive and they like to do
Right,
it.
Yes.
sure. Yep.
So anyway, we think that's a good one.
And frankly, the other thing is that there is a major magnet there already, which is Tendercroft
Tendercroft,
Farm. And
Tendercroft.
people, come from, they don't come from the east because they'd have to come by boat, but.
It's not just
they
Tendercroft,
come
you
from-
also have the boat ramp there.
Oh,
People
yeah,
going in for the
sure, right.
weekends and the summers,
Yeah.
fishermen.
And we don't know what will happen with Fernald's. That whole area could really take on new life because it's been, relatively quiet for the last several years for lots of reasons. So,
Right.
all you have to do is go to Essex. You may not want, what's along the Essex River there, exactly the same, but Essex has the kind of businesses that work well out of old residential property, et cetera, really does.
Antiques and clams.
Yeah, yes, though, don't go to, never mind, no. Okay, so, economic development activities, coordinate and focus them. Form an economic development task force. That happened, but it never went anywhere, for lots of different reasons, I think. So I guess the double question mark there is me more than anyone else, sort of saying, well, what specific recommendation might we make about focusing?
So what would be the task of that committee?
Well, the question is, should there be a committee?
Yeah,
That's the first question. And the second question, if there's not a committee, should it be the responsibility of the planning board? Because we keep on talking about it, I think, more than anyone else does.
yeah,
Your work has informed an awful lot of my thinking on it. And do we want to have language here like, begin discussions with property owners to explore, development alternatives? The other thing that we've been doing, which is trying to reach out to the city of Newburyport to see about the whole issue of water. I mean, nothing happens in terms of one of the things we can cut right to the base here, is that there's nothing of any importance that will happen out there until we get water, and other utilities. So I think that the extent to which we can put in here as a work item, that's what we want to do.
That's the focus.
And everything else is not irrelevant, but all those other things flow into it. And if that can be done, I think that's what we should do, but I don't think an economic development task force helps.
I don't think they can do anything. That's
don't
why I'm
think-
asking.
No.
Because
Well, right, I would
agree.
agree. But I think, for example, something that has never been tried, as far as I know, in the community, is to go to, for example, the Essex National Heritage Area folk, to go to the North Shore Tourist Board, to go to the very active, mostly located in Salem, tourist-focused agencies that are both national and local, and say, okay, how does one go about as a community opening yourself up to and encouraging both tourist businesses and tourist business?
So
Because
now,
they're-
you referencing 1A, or are you referencing Route 1?
I'm referencing essentially 2-1, meaning saying that the way in which I think the greatest potential for economic activity in this town in the short and long term is to realize what we are. And that is, we're not a potential site for an office park or a factory. We are basically potentially, well, I'll be very specific. We're potentially the reason why all kinds of people go to my homeland.
Right.
The UK is a tourist attraction from, John O'Groats to Land's End for 1,000 miles. It's like sort of a huge tourist Disneyland full
all
of
right, bring it
historic.
back to Newbury. And why?
Well, okay, because I think this community could be developed in the kinds of ways that small communities there have reached out to bring people with money, who spend money, etc.
I think you're right on. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think we have to kind of make Newbury unique and what's wonderful about it and work off of that.
Now, I agree with that, and I see that happening on Route 1A. I don't know how that works on Route 1, but I guess it could. I mean, there's nothing standing in our way, because there's no establishment out there.
Yeah.
I mean, all of the uses that are there could be easily,
For example,
if somebody really had
if
a lot
there
of
was-
money.
If there was water and sewer, isn't that a place for a potential hotel,
It would be with a
Absolutely.
Basha property.
right? I mean,
It's
you've
not
got a train
exactly
the
station,
use, though.
you've got,
I
right?
would, I don't think so.
Probably not, but who knows?
I mean, look at the problems that our friend Mr. Karp is having.
Oh, but is he really having the problems? He's
Oh,
just,
by the way, I mean, I
he's having problems today, but,
but there is something I would not recommend allowing demolition of those properties before you have a plan in place.
yeah, right,
That's exactly what happened at the Filene's project downtown.
yeah.
And they allowed the developer to go in and demolish those properties. And they sat with a hole in the ground for 6 years.
Oh, yes,
And I'm not saying that,
right.
but I mean, you always have to be very careful and tie it to the development process, not just to say, yeah, go and demolish.
Newbury.
I wanted to say.
Anyway, but one of the things I would add to that is, for example, if you get off the superhighway, okay, coming from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, wherever, at exit 55 in Newbury, Byfield, all you can do is get a hamburger and gas your car up. You can't stay the night.
But if you think about it, David, you're right, there is a need, but if you're gonna stay in the area, wouldn't you wanna stay somewhere where there's a view on the water versus
Oh,
stay
sure.
right?
You want to stay either
Yeah.
on Plum Island, which is
Sure.
unlikely, or downtown.
But what I'm getting at is, if you go into, we have a general store, which very nicely touts itself as a tourist information center, which is one of the reasons they get to contravene the sign laws,
There's a
apparently.
plaza.
Anyway,
Main Street.
yeah, it's.
Main Street or
No,
just
no, no,
Pearson?
no, it's at Pearson Plaza, okay? Now, if you go in there and you ask, is there a B&B in town? What's the answer? No.
I don't know.
Or I don't know, right? Or where do I stay? Now, or where can I eat? Or where can we get a bucket and spade for my kid? You know, I mean, we don't have that sort of,
Well, we don't have an inventory
Right.
of likely,
restaurants within
likely
walking
tourist interest places. We don't have
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Because
So you lose
not
them.
that, there's not that many, am I right?
Right.
It's very few.
I mean, it's not that many.
B&Bs?
Your house.
B&Bs?
No, just, if I would ask you, go out and do an inventory of places that would be of interest to a tourist in the town of Newbury,
You're gonna go down to Plum Island.
because you're not gonna do anything. Maybe the Old Town Green and the Lower Green and the Upper Green.
But one of the things is we are a major, major international birding destination.
That's true.
But the problem is, you can't, with the exception of a handful of places in your report, all of which are fine, you cannot lay your body down here for a night. So, I mean, I've dealt with this because I have many birding friends who say, okay, if you come to Boston and you want a bird, and they talk about essentially starting in Boxford, then going to Plum Island, then going up the
That's an
coast to
interesting
Rachel
point.
Carson, all the way up into Maine. They do us in a few hours because there's no place to stay until you get to Portsmouth.
But that goes back to being a tourist community.
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
I think that's something worth looking into.
Right. You know,
I don't
and
think
I
I'm gonna
know-
be promoting and
I'd-
backing no
I'd-
hotel.
I'm just be surprised if we were able to develop a hotel before
Oh, I
it
agree.
happens in
Right.
Newburyport. That's all. Anyway, let's
Yeah.
move on. We've got 10 more minutes. Dave.
Okay, all right, fine. So, okay, more local service and convenience retail in town. We really didn't think that was sort of, you know, I mean, we have it, and we didn't think that was a major thing, so we blacked that one. Support and encourage home-based enterprises. I think we are doing it, and we should continue to do it, because it's a way of getting activity of all kinds. And.
But wait, home businesses isn't under economic development, though, is it?
Yeah,
But we don't get any money off of home businesses, so why is it under economic development?
because it's jobs.
Just because,
It's a job.
Right, and we also do get some personal property off of.
Yeah.
Personal property tax.
I'm not saying I'm against home businesses, I'm just looking at it from revenue standpoint.
But it's twofold. It's revenue and it's jobs.
Okay, job related.
Yes, right. And I think the other thing is, it's another part of what the master plan should be about. It may be the difference between someone being able to live here and not. Right? In other words, if they can run a business here, economically, that they can't afford to rent space to do it, but they can do it out of their home, then they're gonna stay here, and that's a good thing. That's a plus, it seems to me. Okay, so let's go on to transportation. Where most of these are all continued, the one thing that we've put in there in red is village center growth, talking about essentially making more provision for pedestrians, for bicycles, and other, you know, other means of transportation. I don't know that we're back into horses yet, but, you know, who knows? And all of the others, we pretty well have continued. I think, again, my focus would be here in terms of a question, and that is, where are the priorities? Are the ones that are there the right ones?
See, we've got them there as high, medium, and do you
Yeah.
all agree with that?
And they may not be that way. But noticeably, we haven't managed to achieve anything in the green department
In transportation?
in transportation. However, once we get into community facilities and services, we have a capital improvement plan and a
Huge.
right, bunch of stuff there.
It is.
And we've developed a professional management team to administer town affairs. I don't say we personally, but we pushed for that, just like a number of other people did. We've got all those people hired, and we even did, between the time this was written and now, increase the number of selectmen from 3 to 5 on the recommendation of many people in the town, particularly the Governance Commission or Committee. Most of the other things are really continued activities, and again, maybe we should be looking at the fact, for example, the one that's almost off the page, at the top there, 1-2, relocate, redevelop police station, town hall, senior center,
center.
that's the next line down, and DPW.
I thought that the DPW was looking to be relocated. Is there still an interest in that?
Probably not, that's from the old language.
Yeah,
That's from the plan.
and that's from the notion of talking about, what do they call them these days? Town campuses, which makes me cringe, but
I know what you mean.
anyway, you know what I mean. That, whether we want it to be high or not, is high anyway, isn't it?
Yes.
Police is certainly high.
Yep.
Yeah, right, yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So, okay, water and sewer, that we know is prime, that's 2-1. Wastewater, the Upper Green and environments, Cottage Road area is going to become a problem, which we should really get ahead of, rather than have to deal with it after the event.
Cottage Road as far as water quality?
It's wastewater.
Yeah, but it's wastewater affecting the wells, isn't that the concern?
I
Well,
think so.
no, but two things. One is that most of I'm sure that it'll be a Plum Island situation, but also the thing is they're on the river. And if they
Just
start,
So you're aware of, that's not the only section of town that's having those issues.
well,
There are other ones along 1A that are having similar.
Okay.
Not my neighborhood, but.
no,
I've
but,
heard-
Yeah, like who?
I've heard.
yeah. But I mean, that's, the problem there simply is that most of those people do not have any land.
It's a huge concern, because
Yeah.
first of all, the people have no means of moving forward.
Right.
Unless the town gets involved.
Yeah,
You have people
right,
that are not wealthy, that have gotta have to
Right.
figure out how to get
Right.
water.
right. Yeah. And you have a situation too with, a landowner, et cetera, et cetera. It's a complex thing, but I'm afraid it's gonna be like Plum Island Beach, It's gonna be a disaster before it gets to be attended to. Okay, public water supply, well, we know, we've been talking about that. So here we are, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Are all basically sort of using all the resources and including more. And I would stress the fact that we do need to explore ways to involve a larger group of people who live in the town. We just, it's the same old folks who seem to be doing the same things all the time. Except for George, of course, who joined us. Okay. And then, yes, that's what we're doing, 3-6. And, there has been, this initial presentation about the Community Preservation Act. And I think that, speaking personally as a board member anyway, I think we should adopt it post haste, but,
We addressed this, I think, about 5 or 6 years ago, and the concern is that other boards did not see the necessity. But I think after looking at the need for the police station and needs of the town hall, I think it would be much more accepted than it was back then.
yeah,
be
though
right.
interestingly, those particular needs would not be greatly helped
By a CPA.
by a CPA.
It's not enough
Only
money. It's just not
There are
enough money.
three categories. There's historic preservation, affordable housing, and open
Parks.
space.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Open space,
Yeah,
So it's
Yeah.
preservation.
right. And most people use them for parks and stuff like that, but
So what do they use then, what do you do for money put aside for government facilities? That's just your regular
bond,
tax?
bond,
bonds.
your bond.
Bonds, that's, when you stop paying for the school we built.
You're
we
gonna
start
bond,
paying
that's
for the
right, you're
police
gonna
station,
start
yeah,
paying for the
or
police station.
whatever, yeah. But with
one
the
to another.
CPA, we could have done a number of things, which we had absolutely no money to do. For example, if we'd had CPA funds, we could have used some of those funds to really explore and much more aggressively market the two schools we've ended up selling. Now,
That's what I was
Right,
thinking of.
right,
That's
yeah.
why I was thinking town
Right.
hall.
Right.
yeah,
Because of the
right.
bridge.
Is that
Yeah.
what-
On the historic
Preservation.
Yeah,
preservation
historic side.
aspect
You
of
know,
it, right.
and the point is, I mean, you know, we were able to do stuff, but it was all volunteer labor, with nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, we really had no money to, for example, put those buildings into a much more aggressive pattern of sales. And if we'd had money, I think the selectmen, frankly, would have been more interested in doing something about the buildings. Whereas for the longest time, they dragged their feet and did nothing at all until the water was pouring down the staircase. Okay,
What's next?
what's next? What's next is the biggie, of course, land use. Now, this one was where the, basically, the whole section was in some ways kind of recast. In other words, we didn't derive in the past, I'm talking about now when I did this in 2005-06, what we did was we looked at what our goals were, and then essentially looked at some other issues and tried to make this something that talked about needs of the town generally, which is why the objectives are a little bit different than some of the other sections. And so that's why I put the red thing up there. The introductory statement and the goals below need to be reviewed in the light of things that have happened, because clearly transit-oriented development now is of a different order. But interestingly, we've come back to it, haven't we, in our discussions tonight? Okay, here's the stuff, basically.
So a lot of the things that you're gonna see in here were in other sections as well.
Yeah.
So the, restart discussions with Newburyport et al. On water supply. So, that's something that's at the heart of our land use policy. It's at the heart of our economic development policy, and it could be at the heart of our housing policy.
And 1, 2, and 5.1, the black ones are the transfer of development rights thing, which we've sort of explained, I hope, before, is really a dead tool. It's nothing that we can currently use, or ever, for that matter, in this
Is there
community.
anything currently under land use for the maintenance of the upper green in regards to the stormwater runoff that's causing ducks swimming in the ball field right now? I'm serious.
I know,
There-
'cause-
there's that needs to be addressed. I know that someone left a nice endowment for flowers, but it's not just about, it's stormwater. It's just draining there.
It's not well graded, I mean, it's a
Well,
deep.
there's
Wow.
another issue there, which Tim was explaining to me today. I guess at one point, the pond was dredged to clean it out, and the dredgings were deposited there, and there's a lot of clay in it, so the water actually can't infiltrate through it.
Oh, that's
This neighborhood,
interesting.
It should be sandy.
Yeah, it should be.
I
But
didn't
if you,
realize that had happened.
Oh,
I've
that's
always
an
been
interesting
scratching my
story.
head because-
yeah, but I would just
So
say,
that's what he wants to address
Yeah.
in some
Yeah.
way.
That would explain why it's so deep. It's over my husband's head there.
I know.
Well, no,
Well,
the pond itself,
yeah.
apparently, when they dredged it all out, the clay was keeping the water in there, so when it was dredged out, the pond stopped holding water, and so the level
They-
went way down.
And
Yeah.
they put the clay on the lawn where
Oh,
it
man.
should drain.
oh,
that
they
was-
did exactly the wrong,
Exactly the wrong thing.
yeah, they didn't
That's
realize,
that's a great story.
yeah, the way
Whose
you.
project was that?
I don't know.
Don't name them.
No.
No, it
All right,
no.
so the answer is,
was back in the 80s, I
there
think.
Yes.
there is a need to take care of this upper green. It's one of our
Yeah.
major assets, and it looks
Right.
like,
And
not
then
good.
The trees and the parking.
But I would point out right now, if you drive down Route 1, when you pass Boston Road, look at the big meadow on your right-hand side. And right now,
It's a
40
pond.
to 50% of that is underwater.
But isn't that typical for this time of year?
Well, exactly, and that's why the Upper Green is in part doing what it's doing, but also,
It's never been this bad, though.
no, I
It's
agree.
excessively bad
Well,
now.
nor's my driveway been this bad, too.
Yeah.
Okay, so we did quite a bunch of stuff here. What we took out the transfer of development rights. And the last item here is just a reminder that we do really need to get the open space plan done, because right now, if we don't have one that's been approved at the local level and filed, any funds that might be available to the town,
In regards to what kind of funding, for what
well,
projects?
for any kind of open space and recreation stuff could be held up. In other words, it's,
There's potential grant money out there?
yeah, well, yes, for example, if somebody wanted to see if they could get into the agricultural restriction program, okay, and get considered, now the chances are slim, but it, it's still going on, then in all probability, they take one look at the fact that we technically don't have an open space program, which includes that kind of thing, and say, sorry, we're gonna go to community, A that has one.
Right.
And people don't seem to realize that,
I think that if you made the argument that there's potential funding out there, I'm sure that it would be approved much quicker.
Yeah.
well, I think you're
I mean, I
right.
thought that in discussions with Tracy that she was interested in doing this.
Well, she has recommended for the warrant, including an article for funds both to update the master plan and the open space plan.
So that would be good.
Okay.
So I think we're probably done, right?
Yes, we are done.
And I have a question, I'll make
The
a
last
statement.
page.
Yeah.
Virtually every section we've gone through here tonight shows there's a need for water and
Yes.
septic. You
Right.
can't live without it. And I
Right.
think
Right.
anybody watching this, just looking at it for the first time, would say, I think there's a problem here.
Yeah.
Once that problem is resolved, we might get an
You might
industrial
get some
base,
development.
which we
I have a
absolutely need.
150-page report you want to read on it.
Oh, I know you have, but
You do?
there has to be a matter of practicality, and that has to be taken into consideration. It becomes how practical is it, and when can it be done?
Right. Well, you are 100% correct. So I think where we are, for everyone who didn't work on this, is that we'd like your comments, just write on the documents that were given you, and if you could hand them in to the next meeting, and then we'll go from there. So John, Kathleen, and
Right.
well, you'll be no, you're not a member yet, but yeah, and your
Coming
comments
close.
too, and your
Coming
comments
close.
too.
Please vote for me.
By the time
So-
we get to it, you'll be.
And then what we might want to be doing, based on a preliminary conversation we had with Tracy, is maybe present parts of this to the Board of Selectmen on the accomplishments. So, but we're not going to do that until you've all gone over this and figured out where we are and did we do the right work and any recommendations you would have, okay? So.
Right. I would just suggest that the rating part of this is probably
Yeah, the priorities, the.
most priority.
Primary responsibility, and then
Yeah.
priority and
Yeah.
funding needs.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we,
Right.
but also where you think that we are wrong on something, that something should be included or something,
Right.
whatever.
Is it possible, I don't know how this works when you revise a master plan, I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
If you keep the, doesn't this pretty much stay the same, but it goes in the back of the appendix or something, and then this,
Okay, I think there is a format, but one of the things you have to do, and in our case, it will be mandatory, is because we've had a national census between then and now, we will have to plug in new census figures and a bunch of things like that. So we'll have to sort of essentially say, okay, we're not making assumptions that's a number of the very base numbers here have not changed, because we know that they have.
but we need to make projections for the future though, don't we?
Right, so I think that,
Right.
that's where we think that MVPC will be most helpful, because we think that they probably have been doing some projections. So, updating a demographic and income profile
Yep.
would be, like, that's what you want to start with. And the extent to which that is then, that is incorporated into an update, I don't know. A lot will depend on if money does come forward at town meeting and we can hire someone, then they'll start manipulating an awful lot of this stuff.
We'll be
So we'll
involved
see.
with the text part, once we get the goals down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. So once we get this, well, once we get the goals, then what we don't know is that we would then probably take this to a public process
Of course.
and see what people in the town think about this. And do they think we're right or wrong, and we'd adjust it accordingly. And then if there are work items that come out of this, like, let's work on 10 issues, then we'll start working on 10 issues, 5 issues, whatever they
We
are.
had multiple meetings last time, didn't we?
It went
Oh,
on for a
I'm
long
thinking
time.
we would have now, of course, you were updating something from 1980. And so it was 20 years old. This is really just 8 or 9 years old. So it's,
Oh,
and you were going through a very dynamic period of time where you'd grown so much.
But what I'm trying to understand is if we're looking at this table right now, do we have the ability to move the higher priority sections like
Sure.
police station to the very
Yes.
beginning of the
Oh,
table?
Yes.
oh, yeah.
Or do we have to keep it
Absolutely.
the
No,
same
no, no.
format?
No, I
No.
mean, no.
No, we have an existing format, and what we're trying to do is take that format and change it. Well, using the format, but change the priorities if we want to.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Okay? So let's get to liaison reports. Do you have anything from the board aside from, everybody's read the stuff about the board and what they've been doing with taxes and stuff, but anything else that you want to report?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And then on MVPC, anything?
No, we met and we actually had a very interesting discussion about the goals and objectives of the commission, which is the first time the commissioners have sat down and done this at a public meeting, I think, for half a decade or more.
Well, that's good.
Which is good.
Good. And then, John, anything?
No, we had the world's shortest meeting I've ever been to. There was one item of note, and that's the shoehorn situation at Plum Island where no vote was taken, so.
Martha, do you have any other issues?
No, one thing on MVPC, we did sign up for the pictometry flyover, which is gonna be happening, I think sometime this month. David, do you have any? They usually try to do it before the trees come out, the leaves come
Yeah,
out on the trees.
last I remember of that, they didn't have enough people, but it turned out they were probably going to do it.
They're gonna
any-
do, what they're gonna do.
Yeah,
the
it's kind
entire
of one of
region.
those situations where they're gonna be doing it anyway because they're gonna sell it to other people, the communities. And so, I think it's gonna happen, which is good, because we
No.
need, an update done.
Yeah, because the last ones were done
Yeah,
in
right,
2012, so
yeah.
we will be getting new images, which is great.
Yeah,
Okay, so next week, or in 2 weeks, we have the public hearing for the
Right.
3 items.
And Marshall Jesperson would like to come in that night.
Right.
With the, the request for the release of
Okay.
the performance.
It'd be nice if we could hear again from TW on the Pritchard property. I need to call the Caldwell Farms folks to set up a walking
right.
trail trip, and I'll do that this week. Anything else? No? Can I ask for a,
So
Move
moved.
that we adjourn.
there you go. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We're done.
Martha?